Hi, I'm Dwayne Brown. Tonight on KPBS Evening Edition, get ready for the next phase of the minimum wage war in San Diego.
Plus, how are San Diego's police and local black communities responding to the tensions over the police shooting of Michael Brown in Missouri? I'm Peggy Pico with that conversation, and the proposed plastic ban debate heats up after a statewide measure clears another legislative hurdle. Supporters and opponents weigh in.
Also tonight, a lot of San Diego taxi drivers are parking their cars. We'll tell you why they're making a switch to Uber and what the cab companies are trying to do to stop it. KPBS Evening Edition starts right now. Hi, good evening. Thanks for joining us. San Diego Council voted today to override the mayor's veto of a minimum wage increase, setting the stage possibly for city voters to make the final decision. KPBS reporter Claire Traeger has been following this story, and she joins us from the newsroom. Claire, what did the council decide specifically today?
The council voted 6-2 to override the mayor's veto of a citywide minimum wage increase. The two no votes came from the two Republicans on the council, while the third Republican, Lori Zapp, wasn't at today's meeting. The vote means minimum wage in San Diego is scheduled to rise incrementally to $11.50 an hour by 2017.
And the council vote split along party lines. We already know there will be more hurdles for the wage increase. Tell us about that.
Yes, after the council's vote, I talked to Jason Rowe, a spokesman for the group San Diego Small Business Coalition. He says they are planning to collect signatures to force a referendum. That would put the wage increase on hold until after a public vote, which likely wouldn't come until June 2016. Jason Rowe says they plan to spend several $100,000 to collect signatures and are funded by business and trade associations.
And their spending will likely be higher because they're expecting some opposition. Is that right?
Yes, a group called Raise Up San Diego says they're planning to plant people next to signature gatherers to urge voters not to sign their petitions. They've raised about $300,000 to do this, with money coming from unions, nonprofits, and foundations. Rowe calls those efforts a voter harassment campaign, but Raise Up San Diego says the purpose is to educate voters about what they're signing.
And when can we expect this battle for voter signatures to begin?
The referendum will likely be announced tomorrow, and you'll start seeing signature gatherers at your local grocery stores about midweek.
KPBS reporter Claire Traeger. Chula Vista Elementary and San Isidro school districts in the South Bay are stuck in contract negotiations. Chula Vista and its union were back in mediation today, but are now at an impasse and are going into fact-finding. Both district unions have pre-approved strikes if negotiations fail. Sticking points are salary and medical coverage. The former head of internal affairs at the Border Patrol is accusing the agency of covering up suspicious deaths. James Tomshek has filed a whistleblower complaint. He told the Center for Investigative Reporting that at least 7 deaths in the past 4 years were, quote, highly suspect, end quote. He says agency leadership tried to make a case to justify the shootings instead of doing a genuine review. Tomshek was removed from internal affairs 2 months ago. He's still with the Border Patrol in another department. National Guard's been sent into Ferguson, Missouri tonight, trying to prevent more violence after the fatal shooting of a black teenager by a police officer this month. Today, the family of 18-year-old Michael Brown released the results of an independent autopsy showing he'd been shot 6 times, twice in the face. The Justice Department is planning its own autopsy. President Obama says Attorney General Eric Holder will meet with leaders in Ferguson later this week. In the meantime, Obama called for understanding and healing.
While I understand the passions and the anger that arise over the death of Michael Brown, giving in to that anger by looting or carrying guns and even attacking the police only serves to raise tensions and stir chaos. It undermines rather than advancing justice.
Reaction to the Michael Brown shooting has stretched across the nation. Peggy Pico finds out how police and communities in San Diego are responding.
Joining me with further details are my guests, Lechala Wilson, president of San Diego's chapter of the NAACP, and Ben Kelso, president of the San Diego Black Police Officers Association. Welcome back.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Now, Lechala, why do you think this tragic shooting has galvanized the attention all throughout the nation?
It's galvanized attention because this was a tragic shooting where you had an unarmed young man who was African American, and as far as the witnesses have told us, his hands were actually up in the air. And that's why it started with the saying, hands up, don't shoot. And then it follows other tragic shootings. And I think with Ferguson, with the mix of that population where it's 70% black, but then yet the police force, out of 53 officers, there's only 3 that are black. And I think it was just a symptom of a long-term problem that's come to head. And they're not going to back down. They want justice. And also because of the fact it appears that the officer or the chief withheld information, and what they wanted was the officer identified, they wanted him arrested, they wanted him held accountable, and justice to be served.
So that's some of the attention of the nation. But Ben, you're a black police officer. Do you have some conflicting feelings about this situation?
Well, it certainly needs to be said that that an incident like this and a death involving law enforcement is tragic. This situation is a tragedy. However, it's also important to realize that there is a process and not to rush to judgment on what the facts that have led to the incident are. I think the law enforcement in that area has a responsibility to thoroughly investigate the incident and determine at that point what their next moves will be as to in regards to the officer and in regards to the public. I think that it's really important for law enforcement around the nation to also watch this incident take place and unfold and talk about it amongst their own agencies to determine what is the best learning points to take out of a situation like this.
Well, San Diego Police Department's Chief Zimmerman released a public service video earlier this week on racial profiling here in San Diego. Let's take a look.
The San Diego Police Department does not and will not tolerate any racial profiling or discourteous treatment by any of our officers or employees. If you feel there is a problem, we want to know about it. There are many ways you can report any concerns that you have. Let's all work together to make sure we continue to foster the highest standards of community trust. Thank you for the privilege and opportunity to serve you.
Lechala, there were phone numbers on that. Do you think that the community here, the black community here, will respond to the police chief's call to use this number and report incidences of what they believe to be racial profiling?
If they do, it'll probably be in small numbers because, again, they're calling the police department, and that's the department that they do not trust. And I think there needs to be alternatives where people, can report racial profiling. I know our branch gets a lot of phone calls, and I know the ACLU also has a number for people to call.
Let me ask Ben about that. Do you think the community will respond to this?
I believe that the community will respond. Whether or not they'll respond in significant enough numbers is yet to be seen. I think we're certainly going to have to find any way we can to make sure we open up better lines of communication with the community and build the community's trust using the best practices for accountability, transparency, and so on.
Well, last year there was some criticism against the police department by local groups who said they were being racially profiled. What is the Black Police Officers Association stand on this?
The Black Police Officers Association in San Diego is a local chapter of the National Black Police Association. As a local chapter, we follow the same stance as our national organization. We are anti-racial profiling. We stand in unison as black law enforcement organizations to speak out against the practice of racial profiling and to promote dialogue and discussion with law enforcement and the community on how to deal with those issues.
Lechala, what's the NAACP doing to foster community involvement as far as getting better relationships with the police department?
When I started my term, this is my third term, I reached out to the San Diego Black Police Officers Association. So far, we have done two community forums, which I titled Close Encounters of the Cop Kind, but it was actually a way to teach the community to know what their rights are. And that's what's part of the problem is that the community doesn't know what their rights are, and they need to understand that.
LaCharlotte Wilson and Ben Kelso, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Today, President Obama announced the first major defeat for Islamic extremists in Iraq. He says Kurdish and Iraqi forces recaptured the Mosul Dam. Obama says it's a major step forward.
If that dam was breached, it could have proven catastrophic, with floods that would have threatened the lives of thousands of civilians and endanger our embassy compound in Baghdad.
U.S. Central Command says it made 15 airstrikes today near the dam. Pope Francis is also speaking out about Iraq, endorsing the use of force to stop attacks on religious minorities. He says he may go to Iraq himself to show solidarity with Iraqi Christians. A San Diego Chaldean is working to stop online recruiting by Islamic militants in Iraq. KPBS reporter Susan Murphy tells us about his campaign to shut down extremists' social media sites.
Islamic militants in Iraq are using Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and other social media tools to share gruesome massacres, post threatening messages, and recruit jihadists from the U.S. and across the globe.
It's fresh, raw footage that's barbaric, grotesque, and I won't allow it to continue.
Ben Kalasho has created an online coalition of people from San Diego and around the world to monitor social media sites and report ISIS activity because he says it's a huge recruiting tool.
They're almost making it cool for people to carry guns, making it cool to engage in these sorts of atrocities. After all, if they're saying that it's the word of God, and for most young people, it's an easy lure for them to be brainwashed.
Kalasho says in the first week they sent thousands of complaints to Facebook and Instagram, resulting in the shutdown of a half-dozen sites. He says those sites had hundreds of followers and contained videos of beheadings and mass executions. San Diego has one of the largest populations of Iraqi refugees in the country. The majority of the roughly 80,000 residents are Chaldean Christians. Many resettled to the region during the decade-long Iraq War that started in 2003. Kalasho says monitoring social media is one way the community is helping their homeland from thousands of miles away. Susan Murphy, KPBS News.
San Diego will consider measures this fall to reform the taxi industry, but cab companies are more concerned about mobile ride-sharing companies like Uber. Taxi companies insist they aren't losing customers to Uber, but they are losing money. Speak City Heights reporter Megan Burks explains how cab drivers are making the jump to Uber cars.
So we're standing here on Fairmont Avenue in City Heights. Let's see if we can call up Uber. So you just click set up pickup location, and it looks like there are two really close to us, about 7 minutes away. And there's our driver right there. And he's actually texting me right now. The text was automated, as is just about everything with Uber. The driver's photo pops up on your screen when he's on his way. You key in your credit card information to pay. There are no tips, receipts, or emails. Leave a sweater behind, just text the driver. The convenience is winning over tech-savvy millennials, and it's also winning over taxi drivers.
My name is Abdul Hamid Somo. I used to be a yellow cab driver for 20 years.
Somo picks me up in a black Lincoln Town car that he leases from a limo company. Quick explainer here, Uber drivers can use their own vehicle or, like Somo, work with a luxury car service that allows drivers to pick up Uber calls. Uber handles just the app and the insurance. As a taxi driver, Somo says he paid significantly more to lease a cab than what he pays now. With the lower overhead, he now has the potential to make more money, even after Uber takes its 20% cut. But Somo says his biggest gain is time.
I have 4 little kids, which is when I go to work, say, Dad, don't go, don't leave us, stay with us.
Somo says he typically works Friday through Sunday. He clocks on by turning on his app, and he can do it as often or as little as he'd like.
Nobody forces you to drive limo, work with the Uber. But if you drive a taxi, you have to drive 30 calendar month or 365 days yearly. Even if you're sick, you have to pay a lease for the taxi company.
Now, to be clear, that's not written into taxi contracts, but cab drivers say their leases cost so much, they have to work that many hours to take home even a little money. Uber came to San Diego in 2012 just as taxi drivers were beginning to demand better working conditions. The city is still piecing together reform, but meanwhile, Uber is ushering in change.
I just went downtown and asked a driver. He said, Uber's the best thing. He was a taxi driver. Uber's one of the best things that ever happened. My lease rate went down. So I think there's a lot of drivers in the taxi industry who are welcoming me in the competition because it's the first time that permit holders in the taxi industry are actually trying to improve it by lowering leases, treating their drivers better because they know they can just leave and work for Uber.
And quite a few of them are leaving to work for Uber, says Anthony Palmieri. He owns the dispatch service for Yellow Cab.
I don't have a customer problem. I don't have anybody. I have enough customers to fill these cabs every day. My owners don't have enough drivers to drive the taxi cab. So the cab sits idle.
Palmieri says about 40 of the 255 cars on his roster currently aren't in service because their owners can't find people to drive them. That means those owners aren't seeing their usual income from monthly lease payments. Palmieri says those leases cost more because, unlike Uber, cab companies have to pay for city permits and outfit their cars with pricey equipment. To level the playing field, Palmieri says Uber should be regulated more like cab companies.
If it looks like a duck, if it walks like a duck, if it talks like a duck, it's a duck, and treat it as a duck.
And Uber is beginning to look more and more like a duck in San Diego. Some of the drivers who couldn't afford the city permits to start their own taxi companies are buying fleets of black Uber cars to lease out like their former bosses. So while the city grinds its gears on taxi reform, former cab drivers are creating a sort of replica taxi industry where those permits aren't needed. Megan Burks, KPBS News.
Well, today, supporters of ride-sharing programs like Uber turned in over 1,700 signatures opposing a bill requiring them to have greater insurance and liability policies. Uber says it supports common sense safety regulations, but the proposed bill would require them to pay 20 times the insurance rate paid by cab drivers. Brenda Tome is an Uber driver. She says the company has many requirements for its drivers.
For one, my car has to be in tip-top condition. My driver's license has to be valid. My registration, they've done a background check. They did a second background check. They're very thorough at what they do.
Tume says she currently pays $125 a month for insurance, and she might have to look for another job if costs go up. The debate over a proposed statewide ban on plastic bags has intensified after a bill cleared another hurdle in the legislature last week. Peggy Pico takes a look at both sides of the plastic debate.
In San Diego, the city council has tabled the plastic ban issue here, saying they want to wait for a decision from Sacramento. Joining me here in the studio is a ban supporter, Roger Kuby with San Diego Surfrider Foundation, and by phone, Mark Daniels with Hilux Poly, a plastic bag manufacturer who opposes the ban. Welcome to you both.
Thank you, Peggy.
Thank you, Peggy.
Now, Roger, briefly remind us why Surfrider supports a plastic bag ban.
Sure, Peggy. The Surfrider Foundation supports a plastic bag ban, really due to the fact that we're on the forefront of the plastic pollution issue. Just for example, in San Diego County, we host over 45 public beach cleanups per year. About 80% of what we find is plastic pollution, and fully intact plastic checkout bags make up the fourth most commonly found item. Another example, more of at an international scale, the Ocean Conservancy, we host a coastal cleanup. They host a coastal cleanup day every year. And about 440,000 plastic checkout bags were picked up by volunteers on that particular day.
And before we address this, Mark, I know Hilux Plastics Poly has said they're against this ban because of jobs and money. What's at stake for your company, which is based in South Carolina, and the industry in general?
Well, Peggy, I'm the chairman of the American Progressive Bag Alliance, and we represent 30,800 American jobs, including 2,000 in the state of California. When we're talking about the cost, one of the things that we find to be very difficult about this bill is they ban plastic bags. They put a full 10-cent fee on both paper bags and then thicker plastic bags that are 5 times thicker than the standard grocery bags. And that's an unprecedented transfer of wealth of up to $442 million every year from hardworking Californians to the shareholders of grocery chains. The grocery stores keep all of that money, and as a matter of fact, they don't even have to pay tax on that revenue.
And let's get your response to that, Roger. It's an issue, jobs and the economy. How do you respond to that?
Well, certainly we don't advocate for job loss. Fortunately, SB 270 has an amendment in the bill that will allow for the plastic bag manufacturers here in California to retool and retrain their employees to avoid job loss. And also, you really need to take, if you're talking about the financial economic impact, you need to take into account figures such as the state of California has reported that plastic checkout bag litter costs the Californians about $25 million a year to clean up. That doesn't take into account the number of hours cleaning up the coastline, et cetera. So there are a lot of economic costs to plastic checkout bag pollution.
Let me be specific about that. Other California cities, including Solana Beach, have plastic bag bans in effect. How effective have they been, and what's the impact been on local businesses?
The reports coming out of LA County, for example, San Jose, San Francisco, who have had this type of bag ordinance for a little while now, show, at least in LA County, showed a 90% reduction in single or couple time use bags. So this includes both plastic and paper. We certainly don't advocate for people to switch to paper bags. The 10-cent fee is geared to incentivize people to bring reusable bags. So the results have shown that it's been working.
Let me get back to Mark on this. Mark, what about the idea that plastic manufacturers throughout the country and here in California could change their factory to produce things like corn-based or biodegradable bags instead?
Well, if a plastic bag ends up in a landfill, it like anything else, food scraps does not degrade. They intentionally are sanitary landfills because you do not want methane gas from biodegradation to happen. So putting things like PLA additives into plastic bag is not necessarily any kind of a solution. And please remember that plastic bag litter in studies in San Francisco, in San Jose, are a fraction of 1%, 0.4% of plastic bag litter in San Jose with their study. Every California community that has put a ban into place has had their waste management budget increase since the beginning of the bag ban. So it has very little environmental or financial impact. So for the state to think they're going to save $25 million is very disingenuous. It's just, that this was done by the National Center for Policy Analysis, and, it's very fact-based information.
Let me end on this, Mark, with you. As you mentioned, several of California's big cities already have implemented a ban. Do you think a statewide ban is actually inevitable here?
No, we do not. Quite honestly, with the legislators that we have talked to, gone over all of the cited facts as opposed to the great deal of imagery and myths that some environmental organizations have put out there for their own benefit. We have many legislators that really think this is a very bad piece of legislation, especially lining the pockets of the grocers.
All right. Well, we are going to have to follow up on this, and there's a lot more on our website. Mark Daniels and Roger Kuby, thank you so much.
Thank you, Peggy. Thanks, Mark.
Thank you, Roger.
I'm Hari Srinivasan. On the next news hour, Margaret Warner kicks off a week of reporting from Iraq. That's Monday on the PBS NewsHour.
About 500 school children will return to classes with much-needed supplies. The nonprofit group Say San Diego spent several months collecting donations from 15 area businesses. Today, volunteers started filling backpacks with school supplies, everything from folders, markers, and crayons to pencil sharpeners, notepads, and rulers. Nancy Gannon Hornberger says the needy students come from all over the county.
So nearly 100 volunteers will be involved in sorting, packing, and helping to make this work. And we've spent the last 3 months gathering supplies. So it's a massive effort to support these 500 students. If we could double or triple that, we'd love to. So the call for volunteers is always the key.
Say San Diego provides support for needy students throughout the year. These supplies boost their confidence and allow stretched families to spend money on other necessities. A family with 2 or 3 children spends about $600 a year on school supplies. Some parts of San Diego may get some rain later this week. Along the beaches, we're looking at temperatures in the upper 70s for the next few days. You see the clouds, it'll start that way. Possible thunderstorms by Thursday along the coast. Inland temperatures in the low to mid 80s. Again, possibility of showers on Thursday. Thunderstorms are expected in the mountains on Wednesday and Thursday, upper 70s, low 80s there. And for the desert, sunny with temperatures dipping just a little bit by Thursday. Let's recap our top story tonight. As expected today, San Diego City Council voted to override the mayor's veto of a minimum wage increase. Now, business leaders are getting ready to launch a petition drive to put the increase before voters. If they get enough signatures, the increase could be put on hold until after the vote, and the election's not likely to happen until June 2016. You can find tonight's stories on our website, kpbs.org/evening edition. Thanks for joining us. You have a great night.